Hi, welcome to Bookmark. I'm your host, Don Noble. Today's guest is writer Michelle Richmond. Richmond is the 2018 winner of the Truman Capote Prize, awarded for distinguished work in short fiction. In addition to 2 volumes of prize-winning stories, The Girl in the Fallaway Dress and Hum, Richmond has published 5 novels. The most recent is the psychological thriller The Marriage Pact. Set in Northern California, The Marriage Pact has been translated into 30 languages and won the Palle Rosenkrantz Prize for Best Crime Novel published in Denmark. I spoke with Michelle Richmond in the Monroe County Courthouse during the annual Alabama Writers Symposium in Monroeville, Alabama. Well, Michelle, it's good to see you again.
It's so good to see you again, Don.
It's been several years and a couple of books and a lot of changes.
Yes.
At the moment, you're still in San Francisco,
We are.
and your husband's still working for the FBI,
Oh, we're getting right to that. Yes, he does.
and your son is how old now?
He's 13. The last time I saw you, he was little. He was, probably a little toddler.
How long have you been in California?
Since 1999.
Oh,
Yeah, almost 20 years.
almost 20 years. And now big changes are coming. You're going to move to Paris.
Yes.
And how long will that be?
We're going to be there for 3 years.
Oh, that is so exciting.
Yeah.
But your
Excited.
work, and we'll look down the road, we'll look for a novel set, if not in Paris, somewhere around
Yeah.
there.
There will
But-
definitely be one set in Paris. I haven't figured out what it is yet, but
Great.
I know the title.
Great.
That's all I know.
Well, while you've been out west, I mean, you're a Mobile girl, University of Alabama, and then Miami and Arkansas. But while you've been in California, a lot of your books have been set in California,
Yes.
including one that people don't know much about. You have a novel called Golden State,
Yes.
right?
That's
I have
correct.
that right,
Yeah, that's
right.
correct.
And it's about contemporary, and this novel somehow, I don't know why, most of your novels have made a lot of splash, but this one has flown low.
Yes, it
And
was
it's-
very quietly received.
All right, but we can give it a little,
Yeah.
give it a little attention right here, right
Yeah.
now. The thesis of this novel is what?
So Golden State takes place on the day when California, in modern times, is voting on whether or not to secede from the United States.
Yes.
And the narrator is a doctor, a general internist who works at the VA, the Veterans Administration Hospital in San Francisco, in my old neighborhood out by the beach. And on the day that this takes place, there's a hostage situation involving a former patient of hers who had romantic feelings toward her. And people end up dying in this hostage situation at the VA. But the novel takes place over the course of this one day, and it came out in 2014. But people, and it came out very quietly. There was not a whole lot of attention for it. But then people, over the last year, there's been a little bit of revived interest because some of the things in the book seem to have come to pass.
Like?
Well, so, I mean, California has always talked about secession, but it's sort of a fringe movement of people who talk about secession. And that's become a little bit more prevalent. Although when, I don't want to go too deeply into it, but when people discovered that one of the people behind one of the larger secession movements is a Russian, then they step back from it a little bit. But anyway, so in the novel, the reason California wants to secede is they feel that they have taxation without representation, and they feel the country is going a different direction than what they want, because someone has just been elected who ran on a border wall platform and pledged to build a $12 billion wall along the border between California and Mexico, promised to roll back reproductive rights for women, and promised to start offshore drilling off the coast of California. And so,
can't have that.
and a huge dam has broken and flooded all of these homes and killed a lot of people in California.
Right.
And so it's just sort of this simmering movement that has come to pass. But it's funny because when I was writing the book in the early 2010 and on to about 2013, it was sort of seemed a little bit bizarre, and my publisher thought of it as very science fiction. But by the time the book came out, there had already been a big movement to split California into separate states.
To three places.
Yeah.
And that's current. I mean, that is happening
Yes.
right this right
Yes,
minute.
it may very well go to a vote.
And the right-wing objection to that is that California would then have 6 senators,
Oh,
so,
right. Oh,
so
yeah.
to speak.
Yeah.
And that the power of California, not if they don't secede, but if it divides into 3 states, that they would have a huge amount of power in the United States Senate. And,
yeah,
of course,
that's true.
maybe the same number of representatives in the House, but triple the number of senators.
Yes, but of course, California is different states, because we have
Right.
sort of the Orange County, we have San Francisco. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's not technically different states, but
Right.
you'll find pockets of,
Uh-huh.
conservatism, pockets of liberalism. The state kind of has it all. So it would be kind of interesting to see how that would play. I kind of would not prefer for that to happen, but I don't think
that.
it will.
As an Alabama girl, I'm
Yeah.
sure you have feelings about secession
Yes.
and its possibilities
Yes.
and drawbacks.
Yes, it's funny, when I was researching that book,
Yes.
I spent so much of my time researching Southern secession, during the Civil War era, because I wanted to bring a lot of that history in, and I did. So I wrote this whole other thread, but I took it out because I realized it really bogged the book down, and because the 2 secessions are about such different things that it didn't really make sense. But.
Well, we're learning, even recently, we've learned a lot more about 1859, 1860, 1861, and when Alabama was deciding whether to secede or not, the vote was very close. It was, in a sense, like 52-48 kind of thing. Then once it was voted to secede, a lot of the 48 went along with it. But in the actual decision making, it was very close.
Like Brexit.
Yes, yes, a lot
Interesting,
like that. Well, that book deserves more attention than it has
Oh, well,
gotten.
thank you. Thank you for giving it attention.
And I don't know, and I was perplexed because I've known your work all the way back from Tearaway Dress, Fall Away Dress,
Fall Away Dress.
And I thought, you've always had good publishers, you've always had, a good deal of exposure, and that book just seemed to me, just didn't get what it needed.
Well, I do know what happened with that. They put it out on a brand new, it was the first book on a new Random House imprint.
Oh.
And before they even put it out, I think they ended up only putting out like a very few books on that. It was a new trade paperback original thing. And they told me later, we really didn't put a lot of muscle behind that. They decided not to really do that trade paperback original imprint. So
maybe there'll be a little splashback from the Marriage Pact.
Maybe, that would be nice.
Which has done very well.
Yeah.
And this boggles my mind. It has now been translated into 30 languages. I cannot name quickly, Can you?
No, of course
30
not.
languages?
I can't, but you know what? I interviewed a woman a couple weeks ago. I was so proud of my 30 languages, and I interviewed a woman whose book has been translated into 43 languages, and I feel like I have to find a list because I can't think of 43.
I can't imagine how many copies of anything get sold in the 43rd language.
Well, I can tell you from my experience with some of it's every single language is exciting and every cover is exciting, but there's a real different, like sometimes you'll get a very tiny country, and it's so exciting to get that it's going to be in this language and be available to readers in that language with a different cover. But that it is really maybe a printing of 200 copies or something, and the advance is tiny, but it's exciting anyway. But of course,
30 translators. There are 30 human beings in 30 different cultures who took your book and made it into their language.
Yes. So in a way, it's 30 different books.
In a way.
Because I really do, translating is, as you know, it's such an art, and each, you could put the same book in the hands of 2 different translators and you get 2 very different works.
Right.
So
the Japanese, there's a very, very famous Japanese translated novel, came out in 1940 called Angry Raisins, Grapes of Wrath.
Really?
Yes. In Japanese,
Wonderful.
it's
Yeah.
the Angry Raisins.
Oh,
Who knows? But
Yeah.
we don't know what the marriage pact turned into. But that's more sensible, though.
Yeah.
All right, the marriage pact is about a nice young couple, and they live in Northern California, and she's a lawyer, and they become acquainted with a group of people who seem to have some kind of a club or association or, well, social group of some sort, which is known as the things move along as the marriage pact.
Yes.
What's the backstory to this? What was it that you saw or heard or read or perceived on the evening news or whatever that got you going down that road?
Well, it is true. The books always come from something that's floating, something that you read, or I like, as you say, something that you just sort of perceive, or something that. So usually for me, it's a few things will kind of simmer at the same time, and. One of the seeds of this book was a book that my husband had brought home from work called the Federal Criminal Code, and it's reissued every year. And it's about this, that year's copy was about this thick with a dark green cover, and it's super thin paper, thousands of pages, tiny print, and it's every federal law you can break, anything you can imagine, and many that you could never imagine, and what all of the penalties are for each one. And so it's just, I mean, it's a lot of impenetrable legalese, but as I was looking at this book and the enormity of it, I thought, and my husband was in the room, I said, well, what if there were a rule book for marriage? And it wasn't, and not just some, not just some sort of sort of informal book.
We're not talking about Ann Landers.
Yes,
we're talking about something.
No, not, yeah.
Contracts.
Yes, something actually solid that you sign on for, and if you fail to follow these rules, not only will someone know, but you will actually be punished for it. And so that was really sort of how the idea began to percolate, the idea of a rule book for marriage, and then more importantly, maybe, is the organization that codifies these rules and makes sure that members follow them.
Somebody's enforcing these rules. So this couple is invited by her boss? Is it her boss?
It's through her work, and she's a new attorney, and she's done a copyright case for a sort of famous Irish folk singer. And she has done much of the work on his case, and he's won his copyright case. And he invites her. So he's someone whose music she followed when she was young, and she really admires him. And he's so well known in the music industry. And so when he invites them, even though they think, well, this is a little odd, but it's just, he's such an esteemed individual, and they almost think it would be impolite to decline this invitation into this organization.
Right, and law firms are weird that way anyway. I mean, she really feels they need to go.
Yes.
And then the party itself?
It's great. There's lots of good. So their first party is in, where's their first party? Their first party is in Hillsborough, California, and it's a grand estate. All the food is perfect, and it's a small gathering of maybe 30 people, but everyone's so friendly and welcoming and remembers their names. But then they discover that even though the food at this particular party is really great, that you're not allowed to have any help. You can't, in a place like this, you would normally have caterers, you would have cleaners, everyone would be doing everything for you.
Bartenders, caterers, all of it.
Yep. But the society is so closed off that the host, who is a member, has to even prepare the party herself.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is, it rang a little warning bell for me that no outsiders are in this group. This is fun. These are nice people, honey, and we should go back and we should get to know them all better. And they do. They do.
Yeah.
Some paranoia Paranoia is a useful instinct, but we tend to repress it or deny it. You don't want to think of yourself as being suspicious
Exactly.
or afraid.
Exactly.
So when they become interested in joining this, it turns out there is a group, a club, call it what you will. And there is actually a contract. She is actually a lawyer.
Yes.
She should read it from cover to cover.
Yes, she should.
But
well, you know what? I know that Jake doesn't read it, and this is. And later, Jake really regrets not reading the fine print.
Right.
He kind of trusts it to Alice, who's sitting beside him when the woman, the representative of the pact, comes to sort of take them through it and explain how wonderful everything is and how they're going to be supported in their marriage and everything's going to be great for them. She gives them a contract to sign, and Jake's like, well, Alice is the lawyer. So he kind of signs his and he watches his wife. And she's reading it and she signs it and he kind of thinks, well, Alice really wants to do this and it seems fun. And he's also kind of thinking, well, whatever. I mean, it's not a real contract. It all sort of seems like a game, but it's not. And I think what I kind of had in the back of my mind, although I do think it remained in the back of my mind, is that Alice probably knows more than Jake does. I mean, she's more aware of, and she's more drawn to the pact than he is. And part of the reason he does it is to please her.
yes. Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, if my wife wants this, then we'll do it. Right. Okay. What they don't really. All right. I'll tell you my first response at the party, at the very, very fine party, when everyone was so nice to them. I had, at Alabama, many years ago, a couple of students who had been taken in by the Moonies and had escaped later and come back to the university. And they described, they were women, and they had described being love-bombed. They had described being emotionally cocooned and overwhelmed and isolated, of course, with them. And I was thinking Moonies, but it's not just Moonies. What else did you have in mind as a model for this bunch?
Yes, well, I am fascinated by a certain, the book is not about this group. I should make that very clear legally. But it's not about this group, but I love reading about Scientology. And there was a Pulitzer Prize winning newspaper series out of Florida about Scientology years ago, and I only discovered this series maybe at the time, right before I started writing this book, and I'm just very interested. The reason I was interested in Scientology, I mean, long before I started writing the book, I was interested in it because it is so aspirational, and I think people join because it's so aspirational, because the people they put in front as the face of the organization are celebrities and movie stars. And it's like, oh, well, or John Travolta, I started attending Scientology classes and look what happened to me. And, and
or
Tom
a famous
Cruise.
Irish singer.
Yes,
in this case.
exactly. Yeah. So, so in this one, I wanted to sort of play with that idea of all these celebrities are in it all these very, and politicians are in it that you can't really know who all's involved, and that's part of why it's so dangerous, because they have so much power and they know so much about you, because they're like Scientology, they're aware of everything you do in your private time, even though you're often trying to figure out, well, how do they know this?
It's an excellent question. How do these people, your couple, are under perpetual surveillance everywhere all the time, but they don't even know how and why exactly. Although at one point it becomes overt.
Yes.
There's a bracelet and so on. It's a group you're allowed to join, but you're not allowed to quit.
Yes.
And they know everything you do and say every minute, all the time. Is this technologically, I mean, you thought about this real hard. Is this true? Can this be done?
Well, I do think it can be done. I mean, I don't think that's what's really happening to all of us, but it can be. I mean, I'm wearing a basic old analog watch, but like everyone, I have a Fitbit, or I have a Microsoft Health Band, which records even more information. Or we all know, we've all had the experience of talking about something and then opening our Gmail and having an ad for it. We all know that, when we think of our phone as just being our phone, but we also know that if you have Siri enabled, then the listening on your phone is always on, because it has to be able to hear you say Siri, just as the Google Home device has to hear you say, "Okay, Google." So, yes,
Turn
I think
on the oven,
it's
yeah.
all possible. Yeah.
Sure. All right. I'm on board. I stayed on board. Well, actually, I stayed on board till the very end. But there was one point I thought, what? These people, this organization, it's immensely wealthy. There are billionaires involved. It seemed to me that if it wasn't Bill Gates, it was some huge computer mogul also had to be involved. But also they have a prison.
Yes.
In Arizona, Nevada, where is it?
It's in Nevada.
Nevada,
Yeah.
they have their own prison. So if you break enough rules, you go there and they punish you.
Yes.
All right, now, I signed on for the trip, so I was happy
Yeah.
reader. But that's the moment at which a lot of readers would say, "What?"
Yeah, yeah.
Did they?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to take it over the top, and I knew from the beginning if I'm writing this, because I've written a lot about marriage, and I thought, okay, if I'm writing this book about marriage, I am taking it I'm gonna. If the reader is willing to go along with this contract in this organization, then they're in for a ride, because I'm going to keep taking it. I wanted it to get truly scary. And then I think that's part of it. I mean, I live in Silicon Valley, which is,
Sure.
so, that I'm surrounded by that at all times. But it's also part of the reason I have it set in Silicon Valley, aside from living there, is that I wanted it to be this, wanted it to be very possible, which it is, that there is so much money in the organization because they're, they have this, well, their founder is in Ireland, but they have a big Silicon Valley presence, that they would, yes, they have the money to buy an old, unused federal prison from the state of Nevada, make it into their private setting for parties, but also for re-education. Yes. They have re-education, and this is partially inspired. You can with Google Maps, you can look down on the Int base in the California desert, which is the Scientology base where they do have their prison.
I did not know.
For members who get on the wrong side of the organization. Yeah, it's an actual. I mean, it's sort of this big, grand estate, but they have a barracks portion of it.
All right, here's the, as a, adult male reader, presumably empowered, as adult males are supposed to be, or used to be anyway, at many points I said, come on, you don't have to put up with this anymore. You quit, rebel, say no.
Yeah.
But saying no apparently is harder than you think. They don't say no. They keep.
No, they don't. Yeah.
What do you think the psychology of? Is it an unwillingness to fail? Is it fear? What keeps these people from just saying no? I'm not putting up with this for one more second.
For Alice, it definitely is. She does not want to fail. She wants to be the best at everything, and that includes marriage. And once she signs on for this, she's going to do it. So when they make her see a counselor, when they make her have boot camp because she gained 5 pounds, or 7 pounds, she's going to do it. But then they do try to leave, and when Jake goes to their sort of handler and says, thanks for everything, but we have decided this isn't right for us. She says, well, that's not actually how it works. I'm sure you'll discover it is right for you. And Alice gets the same message from her counselor. Yes. And that's when the dangerous things start to happen, and the actual physical intimidation.
And punishment.
Yeah. Yes, and punishment.
I mean, they are mildly tortured at some point.
Yeah, it gets bad.
It moves into, your book moves into kind of 1984-ish, Brave New World-ish, like slowly it evolves, things get worse, and then there you are.
Yeah.
Well, one of the languages that your book was translated into was Danish, and it has
Yes.
won a prize as the best crime novel in Denmark last year. And you went and visited.
I did. That was so
and they
exciting.
took you to the prison?
Yes, I love Scandinavian noir, so that was really fun. But the best part about it is their crime book festival is held in a place called Fängslet, which is an old. It was a prison until 2006.
I see.
And it was a rough prison, and they then did sort of this reimagining of this space in the town, and they turned the prison into an arts venue. But it's still the whole prison, and it still has wire around the walls, and you can have lunch in the prison cell, which we did. But we wandered through some of the hallways, and it is very much they haven't changed the actual buildings except to renovate them, make them clean, so you can go in and have arts venues there. But it was such a perfect place for this book because of the prison setting. Yeah, and we got locked in.
Oh,
Yes, we got because the festival ended. They're very on time, and so the festival ended very exactly at 4. And my editor and some of the people from my publishing house were like packing things up and having a couple little drinks in the little book hall. And we came outside and it was freezing and the wind is blowing sideways and it's getting dark and we couldn't get out of the prison. All the gates were locked.
Nice.
And we wandered around until we found a couple who were spending the night there because they have it as you can do sort of an overnight in a cell, and they had a key. So we made it out of the prison.
Well, it's good to know that you're very big in Denmark. And I'm looking forward to a novel set in Paris.
Yes,
and
that
when
will be
it's
next.
ready, I will read it and we will talk about it.
Oh, thank you, Don. This has been so much fun.
Oh, good to have you here again.